recognise the chair or the secretary of the Bakers Union parliamentary group that we've set up, and asked the bakers would they consider spearheading the campaign, because they represented Greggs on the High Street, for example, Greggs workers, and others. Now, what happened at that executive meeting was that there was a thorough discussion about, one, the importance of the campaign, to be frank, the moral duty that was on everyone's shoulders, but also the issue about whether the Bakers Union, as a small union, had the resources to do that, because it's a hell of a campaign to take on in terms of the whole of the fast food sector. And what Ian and Ronnie Draper, Ian is the president and Ronnie is the secretary, basically recommended the bakers did. And to a person on that executive, they supported it, absolutely supported it. That was, to be frank, I know it sounds minor and bureaucratic, but when you're facing the sort of almost, I suppose, the embodiment of capital exploitation in the companies that they're taking on, I think that was absolutely courageous. If it hadn't been for Ian and Ronnie recommending it and that executive agreeing it, we wouldn't even get to first base in this country on that discussion. So I want to thank Ian for what he did. He doesn't get enough thanks about that. What we've tried to do, and we need to think through the tactics of this, because we've tried to boost people's confidence by demonstrating what's happened in America. And we've had, Ian has had American comrades over on a regular basis, brothers and sisters, and some of you have been at those meetings, and we want to learn the lessons about how they organise in different situations, of course, different circumstances, but the principles of their organisation, but also the reason for bringing them over is just to demonstrate for people here what could be done. Because to be frank, in the last, decade, even, under New Labour, but also particularly over the last 6 years, 7 years since the economic crisis hit and austerity measures were introduced, to be frank, a lot of the trade union movement in this country has been relatively cowed as a result of the circumstances that they're faced. And it's difficult, therefore, to point to victory after victory that boosts people's confidence. So we've had them, but they've been relatively limited. So what we want to do is bring across American workers and brothers and sisters to demonstrate what could be done. And then the other example today is New Zealand. I just think it's phenomenal what you've done, to be honest. I just think it's bloody phenomenal what you've done in terms of the work on the ground and the mobilisation. So far here, let's be straight with each other. So far here, what we've agreed on the strategy was that we would go through the traditional mechanism of meeting with workers, the 10-minute conversation, trying to recruit them, etc. But also we realised that the vehemence in companies like McDonnell's, Costa, etc., of not having any form of trade unionism within their companies was such that individuals organising and being recruited were particularly vulnerable. So that's why we agreed the tactic of gaining support from outside the workforce via the union into direct action campaigns as well. And I think the direct action campaigns had two focuses really. One was to demonstrate to the workers within those companies like McDonnell's that there was support outside, so lifted their confidence, gave them courage really. But also the direct action campaigns, as we saw in Scotland, creatively gained publicity as well. And it wasn't just publicity in the national media. What we had to do is gain publicity amongst our own movement to raise confidence within that movement as well. Because thank God for the Bakers Union, because there weren't many other unions that were rushing forward to organise these workers. So we had to build confidence in that way. And I think that's worked. Within 2.5 years since we've been going, in terms of the direct action campaigns, which started with a small number of us, and most of you are here, outside the McDonald's in Westminster. Poor sod, he gets picketed on all the time because it's the nearest to Parliament. But outside the McDonald's in Westminster, and then we did Oxford Street, if you remember, because we wanted a national. And then I can remember we did a march around Leicester Square, and everyone thought, what the hell's going on here? It was extraordinary. And actually, I think we were picketing shots we never agreed we were going to picket. But that's built. That's now built into action taking place in towns and cities right around the country. I thought the Glasgow work was phenomenal, to be honest, absolutely phenomenal what they did. And it's inspired people to be incredibly creative in the work they do. I like the films that went place as well. People walking into places, ordering their meals, sitting down, and then standing on the table and doing a speech to all the people there. And the management just don't know how to handle it. They literally do not know how to handle it. In addition to that, what we've also been able to do as part of the campaign is link up with other campaigns, like they're meeting at the moment planning their week of action, but the disability groups, Disabled People Against the Cuts, Black Triangle in Scotland linked up with the fast food campaign there. And again, when they join us on the picket lines and demonstrations as well, not only do the security not know how to handle them, but also neither do the cops. They literally do not know how to handle a demonstrator in a wheelchair chaining themselves to the shop door front. It's extraordinary. So I think that where we've got to now, I think is a sort of a plateau, which is we're doing the slow recruitment work, we're doing the direct action to support the recruitment work, but the next stage I think we've got to go much further, and we need to talk about that now. We need to get to where New Zealand is, and we need to have that plan of action over the next couple of years to get to that scale. And the same in terms of the level with in America. And I think we've got this next few months could be absolutely key for us. And I just say, let's go to the different levels. In September, we've got two major decision-making bodies coming together, and we've got to win them to this campaign. The first is the TUC. We've got to get to this year's TUC and translate their words of commitment up until now into investment in a national campaign on a scale we've not seen before. So that means making sure that we secure a debate at the TUC on the fast food campaign, linked up to the retail campaigns and the other solidarity campaigns, but making sure also that we get real signing up of the TUC as an organisation and its affiliates to supporting mass action over the next 12 months. Now I think that this TUC is absolutely critical for us. So we need to work out through our individual unions and the pressure that we can bear, that when that debate takes place, literally we're getting people up to that rostrum saying, yes, we support, of course we support in principle, but we want to talk about the details now. The investment of resources to back up the bakers, the investment of resources to make sure we're mobilising the whole of the movement. And if that is days of action, etc., they're done on a mass basis, not just small numbers outside individual shops around the towns, but literally we're talking about hundreds, if not thousands of workers coming out on those demonstrations. Because I think if we can get the TUC and its affiliated organisations mobilised around this campaign, if we can win and advance in the way we are, we've already had some wins already, if we can do that, I just think it'll send a message right the way across the whole of the labour and trade union movement for whatever struggle is going on to boost confidence for workers to engage in that struggle. That's the first thing. The second thing is the other meeting this summer is September is obviously the Labour Party conference. You saw what happened. Some of you may not know, but Jeremy Corbyn made the decision for this year's conference. McDonnell's had booked a stall and a stand and paid out 30 grand or whatever it was. Jeremy said, send the cheque back. We're not having it. I don't know whether you saw the coverage of that, but he got savaged by a small number of Labour MPs. And I found that extraordinary. I really found that extraordinary. And the argument was, first of all, the party needs the money. And as someone said, it was 30,000 pieces of silver, not 30. It's extraordinary. The other argument is, well, if you're going to refuse McDonald's, you have to refuse some of the others. Well, I thought, well, that's an idea. And we can't, as a party in the future, be in a situation where we're hosting a venue for companies that are so obviously exploiting their workers in this way, and where there is union-sanctioned and TUC-sanctioned action taking place. So it did set an example for the future, and it did frighten people, it did worry people, but that's the nature of the new leadership of the Labour Party. Simple as that. So at this year's Labour Party conference, again, the bakers are affiliated, and so are a number of other trade unions, as you know, and constituency parties, etc. We need to ensure that in Labour Party conference this year, we get a debate and a resolution supporting the action of the fast food campaign in the coming year. That will be critical for two reasons. I'm slightly bureaucratic about this, but there's two reasons for that. One, because we're changing the Labour Party just from an electoral machine into an electoral machine, of course, but also a social movement. So that gives us the authority then to call upon every Labour Party member, when the action's taking place by the fast food campaign, to be out there with them. And it legitimises their engagement in that sense. In fact, it encourages it. But the second thing is this, and this is where we need to do some heavy lifting, and we'll need some assistance from New Zealand on what they've done there, quite honestly. The second element of it is that we've got to now start drafting the detail of the legislation that we now need for when Labour goes back into government, that will eliminate the abuses that are taking place, not just in retail but elsewhere. Now, we've given a commitment, and I've said it time and time again, as soon as we go back into power in the first 100 days, we'll scrap the Trade Union Act that's going through Parliament at the moment. We've got to do two things. One, we've got to hit the deck running with that drafted legislation that we want. So part of the discussion through Labour Party conference is these are the abuses we want to tackle, so therefore we've got to do the heavy lifting of getting this legislation drafted, and we can campaign then around that legislation. It will give us not just something to aim for, it will give us something very concrete to put down when they say, well, what's your solution? This will be it. The second element of that is building support for that legislation, and I mean building it both in the trade union movement but also building it in the Labour Party itself. Because in the Labour Party, all of these issues now are a struggle, both in the Parliamentary Labour Party, on rank and file, etc. So we've got to win people, sounds a bit bureaucratic, we've got to win them to the detail of the legislation that we want to put through. And we've got to make it readily implementable, because again, what we want to do is eliminate these abuses within the first year of a Labour government, and that we're getting people employed effectively then. They're the two targets for this September. So we need to think through mechanically, I'm afraid, how we hit both the TUC and the Labour Party conference to win them to the positions that we want. I say, again, I won't go much on, but the way that we do that, I think, is through the affiliations that we've got in terms of the trade unions, to the constituency parties, if you're a member of the Labour Party. If you're not, do it through your trade union. If you're not, help create the climate of opinion that builds the pressure on both the TUC and the Labour Party for September. Because if we can come out of those to the Congress and the conference with clear commitments to mobilisation, to tackling the abuses, to legislation being prepared for when we go back into government, literally, I think we'll have significant breakthroughs, because that then will give us a period of the following year in which we can mobilise in mass numbers. Finally, let me just say this, the other, in addition to recruitment, and in addition to mobilisation through direct action, which we will continue to do, the other thing these companies shift upon is reputational damage. And part of that is about making sure that we expose the abuses and pour public opprobrium on them. That's what's happened with McDonnell's with regards to zero-hours contracts. That's why they shifted, because it was doing them reputational damage. They spend all this money on advertising to have this glowing image, and what we've been doing is just taking that apart bit by bit. That evil Ronald McDonnell actually was one of the most effective things, I think, that happened, because it knocked them back, it destroyed that one image of that happy clown going along, etc. And I thought that just epitomised that way in which we can just use reputational damage of all these companies to basically bring them to the negotiating table and negotiate a basic deal. Now, to do that, three things really. One, I think we've used social media really effectively up until now. Now that Jeremy's leader of the Labour Party, again, we're now having a new burst, all through his campaign last year, so it was social media that mobilised for us largely. We're going to have a new burst of social media, so when we get the resolutions through Congress and through Labour Party conference, we'll try to use the Labour Party social media resources to link up with yourselves and others to get that message out there. And what's interesting at the moment, in terms of the people that are approaching us, there are artists and musicians and entertainers and others who are saying, you're getting such shit from the media. It's been appalling the last 8 months or the last 10 months since, well, really throughout the campaign, but also since we've been in administration. It's been like a tsunami hitting us. There hasn't been a single national newspaper, apart from the Morning Star, I suppose, that's given us any form of decent coverage whatsoever. In most of them, it's been appalling. And what's interesting, they thought the media coverage of us over the last few months would destroy us in last week's elections. Actually, they were the best results we've had in 4 years. And what turned it, I think, was people's reaction and cynicism now towards the national media, but also them getting messages from the social media and finding their information elsewhere. So what we want to do in terms of the Labour Party is use our social media resources, linked up with everybody else now, on campaigns like this to turn us. And again, as I say, artists and musicians, some of it I've never heard of, but you will most probably know as household names. With music, I thought, oh my God, this is weird. But actually coming forward in a sort of a coalition saying we can turn this and we can mobilise people that they can't. And I think social media is going to be important for us. The next stage, secondly, basically also, is the other issue around public opprobrium, is building a wider coalition. And I think what's really interesting on this campaign, on the fast food campaign in particular, is all of a sudden people are popping up who we would not expect to pop up as allies, in terms of some elements, in terms of, for example, third sector voluntary organisations and others, but also some of the religious groups too, individual priests saying this isn't the right thing to do, right the way across really civil society. Again, exposing, I suppose, really the concerns that we've got as well. And I don't mind that, to be honest. If there's a priest preaching from the pulpit about the iniquities of McDonnell's, I don't mind. You know, the Sermon on the Mount proved pretty effective 2,000 years ago. It might work a bit this time. Now, again, I think what's interesting is we'll build those allies, because anything that we can use in terms of isolating these employers that have introduced, or have learned their profits on this abusive practices, the better. But thirdly, I just say this as well, and New Zealand taught this too in terms of the general activity. I think we've got to use whatever vehicle we possibly can. It's interesting as well. The various organisers of the festivals throughout the summer have approached us and said, look, can you appear at the festivals, Glastonbury, that sort of thing. I did Glastonbury Pyramid Stage once, 40,000 people left the field in 5 minutes. Jeremy and I are doing it this time. I'm putting him on Pyramid, I'm going to left field for quite life. But again, what we'll try and do is use whatever platform we possibly can. And if you remember when we did the BAFTA Awards for the IWW, for the Opera House, literally within 24 hours of that we got a settlement. And again, time and time again now, people are getting up on stages. When we did the Barbican and the cleaners went on stage there, they went below the stage and started chanting, the audience started chanting. They thought it was part of the play, but never mind. Again, I think what we've got to be as creative as we possibly can. I think there's real potential now over the next 12 months to break this in terms of a huge campaign if we mobilise effectively, use the TUC, get Labour Party on board, create a climate of opinion, make wider allies, etc. And I just finish on this really. When I was a kid, we didn't have McDonald's, I was 14 onwards, I served in burger bars and all the rest of it. And we've got to remind people, Charlie Marx was down the corner here, used to get pissed on the roads down here, and he did the Labour theory of value, the capitalist comes along and presents you with a hunk of meat, a bit of dough, and literally there's no value in them whatsoever. If he tries to sell them, you just get back what you've bought them for. The value comes from the person's labour who makes the hamburger, does the dough into bread, puts it together and serves it with a smile. So that's where the value comes from. So we've got to remind people of the strength that they've got. It is the worker who creates the value, not the capitalist who brings the goods. Now, they're preying on the basis that they can exploit and get a profit on the basis that they think there's a reserve army of labour out there, so they can force wages down, inflict zero-hour contracts. What we're demonstrating to them, as a result of the solidarity through the trade union movement, that forced army of labour, they're saying we're not going to be exploited on this end. We're not taking it anymore. And I think that's giving confidence, not just to fast food workers, I think it's giving confidence to nurses who are having their bursaries taken away, arts workers in other fields that are fighting back. And I just think at the moment, you can see it's beginning to change. Now, what was mentioned, Ian mentioned London. It wasn't just London. We won every mayoral seat around the country. In every city, we won. Some people have been saying, well, that's because the individual candidates appealed for all, etc., a wider range. It was because, particularly our cities now, are radicalised. In Bristol, Marvin Rees, great-great-grandson of a slave, a black man, won in the slave city that made its profits there. Incredible breakthrough, because it's a radical city. It was the same up in Manchester and Salford. It was the same up in London. No matter how much Islamophobic campaign that was waged by Zach Goldsmith, Sadiq Khan won. Why did he win? Because, to be frank, London's now a radical city. We've got a huge number of new members of the Labour Party on that as a result of Jeremy Corbyn's campaign, mobilised and got the vote out. The potential there is absolutely enormous, and I think it is as a result of a sense of grievance about how people are being treated at the moment. And one of the bulk of the grievances is actually amongst some of the, I suppose, the most vulnerable workers, and that's what the fast food workers are as well. So the potential there, I think, is enormous on the basis, and I keep saying it, courage, determination, solidarity.